Good day, everybody. Today we're going to talk about exercise as a lifestyle, and I'll be the presenter. My name is Duncan Hutchison, and I've been a kinesiologist here with Cardiac Rehab for quite a few years now. So I'm hoping to not only give you the up-to-date information and evidence-based research on exercise and physical activity, but also I'd like to pass along some of the experiences that I've learned from all the folks that have come through this program before you and pass them along to everybody. And hopefully that will be useful. Okay, so we'll get the presentation started. Go ahead and share slides. Now, all of these slides are also in the back of your logbook that we would have sent with you. And of course, if you have any questions beyond this presentation, we'd be happy to help you with that. Just give the clinic a call, talk to your case manager, all that good stuff. Okay, here we go. So hopefully everyone will be able to see this. Okay, great. So why don't we begin? So like I said, exercise is a lifestyle. So we're going to talk about the different terms, at least when we talk about exercise, physical activity. A lot of them sound similar, and they are, but we'll define the terms so we're all on the same page. We're going to talk about cardiovascular disease and physical activity, how they relate, and what kind of things we need to consider. We're going to talk about the benefits of physical activity, and of course, this is the part that's quite exciting and gives us a lot of optimism. We're going to talk about the risks. A lot of people have fears around the risks, so we'll talk about that. Sedentary behavior, how to return to an active lifestyle, the guidelines around exercise, and any kind of special considerations, and a few tools for success. Okay, so the common terms. So physical activity, it's any movement that puts a demand on your body and your heart. Okay, so walking chores, physical work, climbing stairs, recreation, active hobbies, shopping, anything that you're moving your body, that involves moving your body. And it's going to stimulate those muscles, move those joints, and the heart's going to pump harder and need to deliver more blood and oxygen to the working muscles. All right, so that's physical activity. So it could be anything. Now, sedentary behavior, that's the opposite. That's when we're not moving our body at all. Um, and that's during the waking day. All right, so during our waking day, if we're sitting or lying down to watch TV, even if we're working at a computer desk, or even if we're driving, also, reading, knitting, recreation, that are hobbies that involve sitting, anything that doesn't involve moving our body. That's what we call sedentary behavior. Now, exercise. Exercise is physical activity. The difference between it, though, is that it's planned. So I'm sure a lot of people are aware that, good old-fashioned hard labor, uh, that is, a lot of people say, well, that's exercise. It gives you the same benefits that exercise does. The challenge with hard labor is anyone who's done it also knows there are some risks associated with that. So you could lift something too heavy and pull a muscle, strain something, injure your body, or repetitive motions in labor can cause problems too. So the difference between physical activity and exercise then is exercise is planned and structured. So we're trying to get all the health benefits from labor because we also know that, you know, hard work makes us stronger. We're trying to get those benefits. We're trying to plan it so that we don't get the risks. All right, so we're planning the movements and we're planning the the recreation or whatever it is that we're doing. And by planning it to avoid the risks and the harms, that's now exercise. So the great news with this is that means that almost anything can be exercise as long as we think about how we're doing it. So a lot of folks over the years have told me, well, I don't need to exercise. I do enough work already. And that is true for a lot of people. And what I'm hoping to share with you all and with everyone who comes through the program is that can be enough. But we might be wise to plan it a little bit. So for example, um, if we have a lot of lifting at work to do, it could be good for you, but with certain heart conditions, lifting really heavy lifts can be dangerous. So we may adjust how heavy of an object that we lift, or how many people we help along the way, or how we do it. And we're using uh, some of these things we've learned from exercise in order to get those advantages. Another example would be, let's say uh, you like to do, like let's say you like to do some cross country skiing or some walking in the woods. Well, you may find once you have a talk with your case manager, or once you have learned how to look at the things to consider, you may find that if we adjust how hard we walk or how fast we walk, or whether we're walking up and down hills, those types of things can change the benefits that you get from the exercise, or how quickly we ramp up um, the walking frequency, things like that. So that's all that exercise is we're taking something that we've all known for many, many years, many decades, many lifetimes. We're taking that hard work that we know is good for us, and we're just trying to plan it and adjust it. So that's the good news. You folks can do all kinds of things that you enjoy and are passionate about, and we'll just do a little tweaking to make sure you can do it in a safe and effective way. Okay, so let's talk about getting active with cardiovascular disease. So there are lots of different types of heart disease, and the main type of heart disease that we should talk about is coronary artery disease. Now, a lot of people have heard of this, and a lot of people experience it. It's the most common type. Now, this is the process where atherosclerosis, the plaque that can build up in the arteries in the heart muscle itself, those that plaque can start to narrow or even block the arteries completely, and it builds up within the artery wall. That's why we can't necessarily just suck it out or clean it out. It's actually between the layers of the artery wall. And then that again, like I said, it can close off the opening and reduce how much blood can flow through that artery. And since your heart is a muscle, and our muscles need blood and oxygen to do its job, to contract and relax and to do work, that means that if we have narrowed arteries in that heart muscle, we can really impair our heart's ability to function. And if it's blocked off completely, that's your heart attack. Okay? So, since we know that physical activity or exercise, it causes a demand on our muscles and on our body, and our heart has to work harder to meet those demands. Now you can consider how the plaque buildup in the arteries might impact that. So I want you to think about a sink that is partially clogged, and as you turn the taps on, if the water coming out of the tap into the sink is filling up too fast, faster than it can drain out of that clogged artery, well, now we have an issue of getting all that water through that pipe, and it'll eventually overflow, will become a problem. Well, our body's sort of like that as well. We can essentially have a supply demand issue. So if we have plaque buildup in the arteries, um, and for example, you start to walk up a hill and you start to get symptoms, shortness of breath or chest pain, that sort of thing. Um, you're asking, you're demanding a huge amount of blood and oxygen to supply your heart muscle, but more than can be squeezed through that narrowed artery. Now you have a supply and a demand issue. Now, in that moment, we can't necessarily reduce, or we can't open up that artery in that second. So, but what you can do is you can reduce the demand. You can slow down, right? So it's always important when it comes to coronary artery disease that we, any type of heart disease really, that we respect our symptoms and we listen to our body and we work below those symptoms. So that's one example of how heart disease can interfere with our heart's ability to pump and deliver blood to our muscles. Um, but let's talk about another one. Let's talk about valve disease. So if we, in our heart, we have a series of one-way valves, or they should be one-way valves. And sometimes those valves can become calcified or it maybe there's some damage to them for various reasons. And they don't quite close, and some blood starts to wash backwards um, when your heart contracts. So now it's not really a one-way valve anymore. It's sort of regurgitation. It's kind of coming back in the wrong direction of the heart, and that can be an issue with delivering heart or blood throughout the whole body, right? So valve disease can be another problem that people have, right? So that could impact how much work we can do, how much physical activity we can do. There's other types of diseases called aneurysms. Now, an aneurysm is like a bulge in your tire, but in this case, it's your artery wall. And of course, when you see something like that, you might think it could rupture. So the more pressure and the more uh, intense that you work and that you strain, the more you strain your body, the higher the blood pressure goes in your arteries, and the more pressure you put on that bulge, on that aneurysm. So that could be some potential risk as well. Now, just like the valve and the aneurysm, most folks, the cardiologists are looking very closely, monitoring those things, and when it becomes a significant enough concern, then they'll do an operation to repair those things. And you can talk to myself or one of the kinesiologists here, and we can talk about how we can adjust how hard we exercise, how we can make changes to our lifestyle in order to recover from those types of surgeries, but also avoid the risk associated with that exercise. So that's another good thing. We also have electrical problems that can happen with the heart. So we call those arrhythmias, cardiac arrhythmias. And since your heart pumps and works, the electrical currents are the trigger, or the signal, the switch to tell your heart to contract. So if those um, signals are erratic or irregular, or there's something not quite working properly with them, then the sequence of the heart pump itself gets a little out of whack. And then the blood doesn't go through all the chambers of the heart and back out as effectively. So that can change how well you can be active and how much work you can do. Some types of arrhythmias are not really an issue. Some people don't find any change in how hard they can work or any symptoms at all. And others can be more serious. So you'll have to talk to your healthcare expert about that, and we can help you again, make some adjustments and help you with the considerations. Now, if folks have various types of heart disease, or if they've had heart attacks and they've had damage to their heart, then you can get secondary heart problems, such as cardiomyopathy, which could be like a thickening of the heart wall or a thinning of the heart wall, of the actual muscle itself. So imagine the muscle itself um, thins or weakens. Now it can't pump as forcefully because it's not a big, strong muscle. So that can be, you can have issues with that. Some people will get some, swelling in their legs, that sort of thing. Now, if your heart muscle thickens, you would think that would make it stronger. However, the heart has to hold blood inside, right? It's pumping and it's holding all that blood inside its chambers. So if you have a really thick wall, um, you can't hold quite as much blood inside the chambers, and also it doesn't contract and relax or stretch as easily as the healthy sized muscle. So that can be a problem as well. And I won't be able to go through all the different types of heart disease, and by no means am I an expert, but uh, I am an expert when it comes to how they impact physical activity. Uh, but in terms of the actual details of your specific heart disease, those are good questions for the cardiologist. So if you have a cardiomyopathy or you've had a major heart attack and you end up um, having some trouble, we can call that heart failure if there's some damage to your heart. And heart failure is a state, right? So you can be in heart failure or you can be um, in a good place when it comes to heart failure. You can be functioning well or in control or being managed. So those are things that we can help you with as well. So the good news with all these different types of heart disease, the good news is the heart is a muscle. And what happens when we work muscles? They get stronger. And what happens when we rest muscles appropriately? They recover. So by exercising on a regular basis and striking that balance between challenging our body, asking our body to get a little bit stronger, and then giving it the appropriate amount of rest, not too much, not too little, we can strengthen up our heart. And most of these conditions, in fact, almost everyone I've met over the years, which has been thousands so far, have improved with regular exercise. So I think that's really phenomenal and something that you can all look forward to. So let's talk more about the benefits of exercise. So we know that the exercise is going to strengthen our heart. It's going to help our lung function as well. Uh, and we know that, it's going to help strengthen our muscles throughout our body. But some of you may not have known that it helps strengthen your bones. You have to load your body with forces and gravity and hard work in order for your muscles and your bones to stay strong. Your bodies recognize we need to keep these parts of our body strong. One of the other things too is exercise helps improve joint health. So that's something that's really significant. A lot of people in the past used to believe that you just wear your joint out with a lot of work. And that may be the case with high impact activities or things that may cause injury. But appropriate exercise, we'll talk about types like that in a minute. Appropriate exercise is associated with actually improved joint health. And there are studies that looked at runners, regular runners versus people who don't run, and the runners actually developed thicker meniscus and cushioning in their knees, and their joints were actually healthier in their knees than people who didn't run. Now, I'm not saying you have to run, but there are lots of different ways that we can move our body, move our joints, walking, cycling, swimming, dancing, things that are done in a healthy and correct volume or safe volume that actually will improve your joint health. So that's really good. Now, one of the things that most people find is that I think is stood out over the years as the major benefit is people find their energy levels increase with exercise, and this is perhaps the most significant. They feel better, and so when it comes to quality of life and how you feel, that seems to be the best motivator over time. And I feel that it's, over the years, seeing thousands of people, that's what people uh, improve upon when they focus on how they're going to feel. They're going to feel better. So I think the increased energy levels is one of the best benefits. Now, we know that exercise is going to help prevent and stabilize diseases. And there's a long, long list, and it's ever growing. Uh, Almost everything that every type of health issue that we look at in the health sciences, everything that we look at with regards to regular exercise, we almost find that almost every single one improves with regular exercise. So, but the significant ones, obviously, are the life-threatening ones. And that's the cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancers. Science is showing that regular exercise helps improve uh, and reduce the risk and the significance of all these types of um, diseases. So it's really good news. Uh, Now, I found personally over the years that, like I alluded to a minute ago, that telling someone that exercise is going to help them live a longer life or prevent disease, I found over the years that that doesn't seem to be a great motivator long term. It's a good short term motivator, but I think we can all imagine the person who, and you may be the person who have had a major health event and still find it difficult to get active again or quit smoking, for example. And some people will look at that and say, well, I can't believe they didn't get going. Well, that's because the risk of, and the science supports this, the risk of avoiding something as a motivator um, doesn't really provide long-term motivation. It's good for short term. So, and you think about the cigarette packages and, all the very graphic images they have of all the different diseases on it, and people will still pick up that package and smoke. So it's important to know that there's a risk, but if you yourself have struggled with motivation, just understand that and the um, the science and the anecdotal evidence I've learned over the years suggests that focusing on how you're going to feel is a better long-term motivator. Okay? So just a few thoughts there. All right, so we know exercise is going to help improve our activities of daily living. So our quality of life again, how we function, how we move, our balance, our strength, everything that we can do around the house, our independence. So we get stronger body and reduce our risk of falls as well. And the last thing, well, it's not really the last thing, but the last thing I'll mention on this slide is that it improves our mental well-being. Uh, and it can be huge for helping people manage anxiety and depression, which of course is extremely common after a cardiac event. So regular exercise seems to improve those things. So even though I just talked about risk not being a great long-term motivator, but quality of life is, even though I just talked about that, I do have to talk about risk factors. All right, so risk factors are the things that the healthcare workers and the science community look at or have found and identified as some of the causes for heart disease. All right, so some of these risk factors are outside of your control. All right, and that's really important for you to know because I've met so many people over the years that actually are beating themselves up for being in this physical state at this point. They're saying to themselves, well, I brought this on to myself, and that may not be the case, you know. And regardless, it doesn't really help to give yourself that kind of self-talk. But here's some of the non-modifiable cardiovascular risk factors. So, non-modifiable, meaning you can't change them. They're outside of your hands. So we have family history or genetics. We have age. As we get older, our risk goes up. Sex, whether you're male or female, uh, these sorts of risks have changed over the years. They used to think men were at a much higher risk than women, and now things are changing slightly. And your personal health history. So anything you've done or experienced or any health trouble you've had in the past, well, it's in the past, but it is a risk factor. Now, the things that you have control over are your modifiable cardiovascular risk factors. So the things you can change, or you have at least some influence or a fair bit. Blood pressure. Blood pressure is one of the great things that improves with regular exercise. Um, we know that during exercise, your blood pressure goes up in the moment. But when we look at people after exercise, they are always at a lower blood pressure after a workout than they were before. And that effect lasts for a while. And a lot of these health benefits that we talk about from exercise, they last for a while, but guess what? They mostly last for a day or two. And then your body starts to kind of drift away from that benefit. And that is why we'll talk about this in a little while here. But that is why we need to exercise on a regular basis, almost every day. So blood pressure improves with regular exercise. Of course, our if our bodies if we're overweight, or a better way of saying it is if we have a body composition that is not healthy or as healthy. Um, so, for example, maybe we have a little bit too much fat tissue in our body and not enough muscle mass. Regular exercise will help you change that composition. So you will gain muscle and lose fat. Now, your weight may not go down right away because as you gain muscle, we know muscle weighs more than fat. And as you lose fat, the scale may stay the same for a while. So don't be discouraged, but your composition is healthier. So you'll bone density goes up, means the bones weigh more and they're stronger, and your muscles go up and your fat can go down if that's what you need. Now, that can lead to a lower waist circumference, which is related to heart disease. And then the cholesterol is also highly impacted by our exercise. Your HDL levels go up, your LDL levels go down, and your cholesterol levels go down, and it can impact your triglycerides as well. Okay, so to continue on, stress. Stress is, like on the previous slide, one of the benefits. I was saying exercise improves your mental well-being. Well, it turns out your mental well-being and your amount of stress is a risk factor. So I will speak on this briefly. Our social workers fantastic in the program, and if you have questions, they would be happy to answer them, and we can connect you to the social worker. Um, but I will speak on this. So stress is not necessarily a bad thing. It's good it's normal, natural for us to have stress. The the problem is when we stay in a stressed state for too long, for too long in terms of minutes or even years or days, right? So our body is meant to handle stress. Our blood chemistry changes when we're stressed, and it changes in a way for us to physically react, right? So our chemistry changes, so we're preparing to fight or flight, but or freeze for that matter. But the problem is, in this day and age, we don't get to release that. We don't get to fight, flight, or freeze. We don't get to use um, our body in a lot of cases. So imagine you're at work and you're in a stressful meeting. You don't get to just get up and go for a run or get up, lift some weights and burn it all off. So that's the problem with sort of the mind body challenge here. And if your body stays in that chemistry state that it's ready to do the fight, flight, or freeze, if it stays in that state over time, that can lead to damage to the arteries and lead to the plaque in the arteries. So that's at least the working theory on it. Great news is regular exercise. Guess what? You go for a walk, you go ahead and do these things on a regular basis. It's going to help you break out of that state and dissipate the stress and dissipate and change the chemistry in your blood back to a normal state. So that's why exercise is so great there. Now, sleep. Exercise helps with sleep as well. And we know that a lack of sleep is a risk factor. So again, one of the benefits. I wouldn't exercise right before sleep because it actually will ramp you up, but exercise throughout the day will lead to a better sleep. Physical inactivity or sedentary behavior. This is a big risk factor. So people who are inactive or sit a lot, those sorts of things, like we talked about earlier, what it means to be sedentary, that's a major risk factor. Um, so there's been a few studies to highlight this. One case study was interesting. They looked at a person who worked in an office and sat all day long and then drove home and then went for a run, which is pretty vigorous exercise. And they compared that person to the person who didn't run but walked to work and then worked as a server on their feet all day walking around. And the person who was a server was in much better health state and had much better health measures than the person who sat all day but ran for an hour. So it tells you that we know that exercise and running or walking can be good things, um, but it might not be enough to offset an entire waking day of sitting, or mostly entire waking day. So something to consider. So even if you're not, when people say, well, I putter around, I go to the shop, or I, do jobs around the house, that's actually really good. So I don't dismiss those types of things. If you're a person who gets up and moves around a lot, congratulations. That's one of the healthy things that you have going for sure. Now, smoking, alcohol, drug use, these are all things that increase our risk, and I think most of us know that. And then our diet. We have again a fantastic dietitian here, and I highly recommend them. And yeah, they'll be able to help you with any dietary questions. So we're gonna go ahead to the next slide here. So here's some risks associated with exercise. Now, a lot of people fear exercise, and that's been sort of the common consideration or thought that a lot of people in the West have had for a long time, especially after a heart attack. So I'll explain some of these risks. The biggest risk when it comes to exercise or physical activity is actually a strain or a sprain or an injury. It's not your heart. Um, Now, those risks are still pretty small, and we all incur these risks when we walk around and live our life and do everything we do. So you don't have to worry about that too much. Now, the cardiac events, there have been some cardiac events associated with extreme exercise. For example, myocardial ischemia, right? So an MI, um, that's myocardial infarction. MI, that's your heart attack. Myocardial ischemia is actually when you have a lack of blood flow to the arteries in your heart, and then you um, essentially strain your heart by demanding too much from it without getting enough blood flow through the artery. You can get some, but not enough. So that's myocardial ischemia, myocardial infarction. Those are associated with extreme exercise, or at least extreme for the person doing it, and sudden cardiac death. And those, notably, you may have heard of things like that happening during marathons. So to give you an idea of how much risk, well, the studies vary. Um, Last I looked, it was somewhere between one event and every several hundred thousand hours of exercise. All right, so that means one time with several hundred thousand hours of exercise. So it's a very small risk. And these risks are further mitigated, further reduced when we're exercising regularly and by those who participate in a cardiac rehab program. So, congratulations again, because just having this knowledge will reduce your risk. All right. So, getting active in a gradual and regular way is what's going to give you the least amount of risks. In fact, now we know after this discussion, hopefully, you know that the benefits far outweigh the risks when it comes to exercise. And so, in fact, if we are active on a regular basis, we're at a lower risk than if we sat on the couch and just hoped not to strain our heart. So we need to get active. It protects us. That strong heart is like your insurance package. All right, so let's strengthen it safely, gradually, and consistently. Okay, I mentioned sedentary behavior, and I'll just, I've mentioned this a couple times. Just know that you're not alone if you're sitting too much. Um, this there was a study done probably close to 5 to 10 years ago, and about 10 hours of Canadian or 10 hours a day is how long the Canadians spend sitting on average, which is way too much. And I bet it's even more now. It's trending in the wrong direction. So that's something to consider, right? So it's not healthy for us to sit or lay down. Um, and of course, we know, like I said, it increases our risk. So this leads to a discussion. Now, I'm not going to click this link here during this recorded video, but I will tell you the name of the video. It's right here. If you go onto the internet, if you go onto YouTube, and I'll hold the mouse over here. It actually shows the YouTube link. But if you go to YouTube and you type in "Let's Make Our Day Harder," you'll find a short 3-minute video that will talk about and try to highlight um, what it means to not only exercise, but just consider how we can work a little bit more physical activity into our day. All right, so it's a great little video. It's probably more entertaining than I am, and it's only about 3 minutes, so I think you'll learn from that. So check that out. Um, and what I really wanted to talk about on this point was just to highlight, folks, that you don't have to just exercise. Um, or another way to put it is um, you could avoid exercise altogether if you were active enough throughout the day. But an ideal combination would be to deliberately exercise a few times a week, or whatever you and your case manager deem is the right amount. And then during the other times of your waking day, just try to move around. Just try to get up and do physical things within your ability. All right. So whether it's chores or dishes or walking to the corner store or playing with your grandchildren or playing, some recreation with friends, anything like that. Even if it's not official exercise, it's still good for you. Okay. So the latter half of this presentation will be a little bit less talking about all the various examples and a little more, it'll be more of a summary of the guidelines. So hopefully you'll make it to the end. If you've made it this far, it should go a little faster from here. Okay, so how do I get started? Well, I've talked a little bit about this already. In a summary, you want to start low and go slow. All right, so that means any new activity, any recreation, any exercise that you'd like to do, or any physical work you'd like to do. If you haven't done it in a while, you want to start low and go slow. Right, so to try a little bit, just a couple minutes at a light level, and then give yourself to the end of the day to see how you felt. Give yourself to the next day. Sometimes we don't feel sore to the day after. And then you progress a little more the next day. If you're working at a very small amount, very small level, like let's say you can only walk for, a few hundred steps or even a few dozen steps, then you might try multiple bouts throughout the day to get started. You might try walking to the other side of your house and back, or the other side of your room and back, and try that a few times in the day. Take breaks. If you're someone who can start with 5 or 10 minutes of walking, that's great too. And then you might add about a minute a day on average. All right, so by the end of the month, you might start with 5 minutes of walking. Doesn't seem like much, But by the end of the month, you can be at 35 minutes of walking each and every day. And by starting with daily exercise, but at a small amount, you're also going to be building the daily habit, which is great. Now, some folks like to do multiple, sometimes people will prefer to do a bit more exercise. They'll say, well, I want to go for 20 minutes or 30 minutes and two times a week. If you go from the couch to 30 minutes twice a week, it might be okay. You might be fine, but you might find that to be too much of a jump, and you might be kind of sore. And the other downside is, um, if if you go ahead and try that, you may be all right, but you may lose. You may not be built that daily habit as easily. You might say, okay, I'm going to do it again in 3 days, but 3 days comes around, and you've kind of forgotten and fallen back into your old habits. All right, so build it up gradually. Before each exercise, stay hydrated. Drink some water. I'm going to do that right now. All right. And then after your workout as well, stay hydrated. You also want to warm up before you get going in the vigorous section of your workout. So the warm-ups, they can be anything. They can be easy walking, easy full body motions. The whole point is it should be easy. It should be a lot lighter than your actual workout. And give yourself a few minutes. Give yourself a few minutes to let those joints start to feel uh, a little bit, um, they'll feel better. They'll feel like they're moving smoothly. And that's because your body takes a few minutes to send and divert more lubrication, more fluid to the joint. It takes a few minutes of moving for your body to do that. So it reduces the stress on your heart. It also reduces the stress on your joints. And your heart needs to accelerate when you start to exercise. And that takes all these things take a few minutes. And this point here, perhaps the warm up point, it's really it could be stressed in a big way because over the years I found so many people are struggling simply because they're not giving their body enough time to warm up before they go ahead and do their hard work, whatever it may be. So give yourself another 5 minutes going light. Your heart rate can accelerate and your arteries can dilate, which means they get larger and let more blood flow through. So that the heart's beating faster, the arteries are letting more blood flow through. Now you can work harder, in a safer way and a more effective way. After your workout, you want to you want to end with a cool down. You want to do the opposite, slow down gradually. And that allows your body to make its adjustments, adjust its blood pressure, things like that. And stretching after the workout is quite nice as well. Helps with recovery and, of course, helps with your flexibility. So expect to be tired, a little tired after a workout. That's normal. But you shouldn't be tired for more than a day or two, and it shouldn't interfere with your activities of daily living. So if you have a hard time getting up from your chair and getting anything done the rest of the day, you worked out too hard. Make sure you adjust it, slow it down next time. And again, it doesn't mean you won't get there eventually, but you got to build up there gradually. Here's the summary of the exercise portion of the program. So the deliberate exercise, we'll look at frequency, so how often you should do it, intensity, how hard, the time, the duration, the type, what type of exercise, and the volume. So that the volume is just all of it added up. And progression. So how fast and how fast you progress things. This graph here shows, this is a nice graph here. It just shows you that the more exercise you do, you can see people walking, then you see them jogging. The more benefits you get, that's the green line. And then it also lets you know though, like I said earlier, if you move beyond regular exercise and you're working more close to training for sport, well, look at this red line now, our risks start to climb a little bit. All right, so there is a dose when it comes to exercise. We don't want to be going as hard as we can forever. That's risky. So we'll talk about those details here. So once we've built up to exercise and we're regularly active, okay? So let's say several weeks have gone by and we're approaching what we call a maintenance phase of exercise, all right? At this point, the studies show it's ideal to be active, to do planned, deliberate exercise 3 to 5 or more days a week, 3 to 5 or more times a week, I should say. Um, so that means that yeah, once you're rolling, you're going to get the most health benefits when you're doing it almost every day. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't mean you can't be active throughout the day, like we talked about earlier. You can be doing chores and you can be uh, playing some, doing some active transportation, like walking places or recreation. But this is deliberate exercise. And the kind of exercise they're talking about here is aerobic exercise. All right, so that's walking, cycling, swimming, running if you're fit enough to run, dancing, anything that's continuous and rhythmical. Now with intensity, you always want to start a new activity in a light level, light to fairly light, and then somewhere between 11 and 13, 11 and 14, or if you're in the maintenance phase, if you're several weeks or months into your regular workout, you might be able to work all the way up to 14 on this scale. All right, so that's subjective, I know, but if you want to know about a target heart range, if you've had a stress test, your case manager can develop a target heart range for you as well. So this is how hard it should feel when you work out. It should feel fairly light to somewhat hard. If you ever experience these signs or symptoms, that could be a sign your heart's having trouble or some other part of your body's having trouble. So you shouldn't get short of breath. You shouldn't get dizzy, lightheaded, excessive sweating, pain anywhere that radiates or chest pain, palpitations, nausea, or anything that you know and recognize to be weird for you. Those those are all signs. If you get those during exercise, you need to slow down. And if slowing down doesn't eliminate those symptoms, then you need to stop. And then if that doesn't work, hopefully, if you've been given nitro, you can try your nitro protocol. Um, and if that doesn't work, after two uh, sprays, so you spray once, wait 5 minutes, no improvement, spray again, wait 5 minutes, no improvement, call 911. Right? Just don't fool around because time is damage when it comes to your heart. The longer your heart's without oxygen and blood in certain sections, if you're having a heart attack, the more damage that can occur. Don't worry about annoying those healthcare workers. Just get there and get in and get checked out. All right? And you can take a third spray of nitro while you're waiting for an ambulance. All right. So that's an emergency. Hopefully you folks won't have to worry about that sort of thing. So types of exercise. I mentioned aerobic. That's continuous rhythmical movement, walking, swimming, biking, things like that. We want to do that most times a week. Stretching, we can stretch every day. We can stretch multiple times a day if you want. All right, that's when you're holding a pose, you're bringing your arm across or you're holding it. You're stretching that muscle out. It's passive. It's not that vigorous, and therefore it doesn't get your heart rate up, but it is good for you. So we can stretch. And in your book, we've got a stretching routine in the back of your logbook. It can be done daily, but it doesn't really strengthen your heart, right? So something to consider. Strengthening, that's things like hand weights or those TheraBands, or there's various equipment that you can use. Strengthening, we don't need to strengthen every day. 2 or 3 times a week is plenty, right? Every other day. Now, duration, like I said earlier, start light, start with a few minutes, build up gradually. But once you're doing about 30 to 60 minutes a day of aerobic exercise, you're getting most of the benefits, most of the health benefits. So that means that the person who does 2 hours a day is not really much healthier than the person who does 30 to 60 minutes a day. So I would shoot for that if you're looking to optimize your health. If it's light exercise, you can go a little longer. And if you're able and safe to do more higher intensity exercise, you probably would get away with less time. But you got to build up to those things. Volume and progression. Volume is just the total amount of all that. It's just a way for us to say, hey, how much did you do in a whole week, or how much did you do in a whole day? So some people will measure steps, and that's fine too. You don't have to count time, minutes, if you don't want. You could just say, hey, look at that. I get 7 to 12,000 steps a day. I'm doing pretty well. And the more steps you put in, the more health benefits you'll get, up until probably somewhere between 12 to 15,000 steps a day. That's where you'll probably max out all your health benefits. Same thing, you don't want to just add all those steps up quickly. You want to do it day by day. This graph here shows the more the higher the volume of exercise people did, their plaque in their arteries either got bigger if they didn't do much, and if the more they did, the plaques stayed the same or even got smaller, right? So if they didn't do enough exercise, the plaque gradually got bigger in their arteries. If they did the recommended levels, on average, it stayed the same or went down. So we can actually improve or reduce the plaque in our arteries, and also stabilize the plaque, which means that you might not be able to get rid of all the plaque in your arteries, but if it's stable, it's less likely to break off and cause a heart attack or a stroke. Special considerations. Um, if you're sick or you're injured, it's not a good day to exercise, right? And if you've got a chronic injury, talk to us. It will help you work around that injury so you can keep your heart and the rest of your body strong while your injury is resting. Of course, if you have new symptoms or signs, that's not a good time to exercise either. And take your medications on a regular basis. Hot weather. The heat is hard. Your body has to work to lower your temperature, to get rid of that excessive heat, and that's hard on the heart. So you need to slow down in the hot weather, adjust how hard you work out normally. So don't just look at your watch, or don't just look at your don't just consider your distance. Say, oh, I always walk this far. I always walk this fast. If it's hot and you're struggling, then slow down, and that's still a really good workout. All right. So you want to avoid the hottest part of the day as well, if you can, and of course all the other things. Wear a hat, work out at a cooler part of the day. Stay hydrated. Cold weather, breathing cold air is also hard on the heart. That's why things like shoveling snow in the winter can also be an extra strain on the heart, because you're breathing cold air and causes those arteries in your body to constrict or get smaller. Less blood flow means your heart is straining. All right, so you want to wear a scarf or a mask or a balaclava in the coldest days, and that helps preheat some of the air, and it helps your heart reduce the struggle during, let's say, a winter walk, or if you're trying to shovel snow. I'm not recommending you shovel snow per se, but if you folks are going to shovel snow anyway, you may as well do it in the safest way possible. So I want you to make sure you're conditioned for it. If you're doing regular exercise and working out regularly, guess what? Your heart and your body is going to be more prepared for shoveling snow. If you wear a scarf over your face, loose fitting scarf, helps with that other problem we just talked about. And of course, you want to be warmed up. So go for a nice walk up and down the street first. And then finally, adjust your pace. If you start to get symptoms, you're going way too hard, and you can pick away at it. You can do a little bit of work, rest for a while, come back and finish the job later. All right? So, tools for success. We've talked about a lot of things today. Hopefully you're still watching this. And I want you to have fun and pick an activity that you enjoy because as I mentioned, you can get health benefits from anything. So the person who walks or rides a bike or hikes through the woods or plays with their grandkids, they all essentially get the same health benefit. So do something you enjoy. If you don't like, slogging it out in the gym and or on a bike in your basement, then do something else. Make your situation enjoyable for you. And then also, um, be active with your friends. A little tricky during a pandemic, but be creative. Go for a walk outside or something. If you're having trouble getting started, measure and track what you're doing. That'll help you be mindful of what you're actually doing. Most people struggle with this. They want to be active, they want to do all the things that make them healthy, but our human habits get in the way. If you measure and track things, it's going to help you be aware of your actual habits. And just by tracking things, you're going to be making changes just by becoming more aware of them. So you can track it any way you want, paper and pen, or log sheets, or um, the wearable technology, things like that. Planning and goal setting. Why don't we talk about that in person over the phone? That would be ideal. But if you're going to set your own goals, which you should, um, try to set realistic goals. I think there's a section on goal setting here on the next slide. But you want to make an action plan. You want to consider what kind of problems you're going to run into and create a plan for overcoming those obstacles. All right. And then expect relapses and plan for them. So for example, people say, well, I'm going to walk every day, but then they don't think about wintertime and Thunder Bay and how it's -40 for a couple weeks of the year. So they stop walking for 2 or 3 weeks during that time, and then they lose their habit, right? So it's important to make a plan. Have a plan to exercise indoors for those coldest days. Have a plan to wear appropriate clothing for the seasonal weather, things like that. Okay. So SMART goals. So you want to set a goal that's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. This can get a little complicated. We can talk about that with some more examples, but this is a slide for reference. Of course, you can't ask any questions right now because it's a recording. All right, folks, so hopefully you have stuck it out, and I appreciate you watching the whole video. Maybe you watched it in sections. That would be great as well. You could put me on pause and handle me the whole time. And if you have any more questions, please talk to your case managers or your healthcare provider. Be happy to answer anything for you. All right, good luck. You'll all do a great job. I know you will. All right, bye for now.